Hello, everyone, and welcome again to Unfound Now. I am Unfound's host, Ed Densel, and as you can see by the title of this video, I will be covering the disappearance of Justin Siwek from Kansas City, Kansas on June 20th of 2021, although it does seem that this disappearance could have started the day before. Justin is a 32-year-old. He is a white male, and he is a father, and this will all come into play later when we get into the public information regarding Justin's disappearance. I want to remind all of you the reasons that I do Unfound Now. Of course, Unfound, the program, is mainly a cold case program. We cover disappearances that are at least a year old. Unsolved disappearances, that's all we do. And we've covered about 225 of them over the last 5 years, but they are cold cases. We have been known to cover disappearances going back to the 70s, the 60s. We've even covered a disappearance in the 50s. We've even covered a disappearance in the 40s. So it's a cold case program. I started Unfound Now to give myself, I guess, the flexibility of covering more recent disappearances that have happened within the last just few months. This started back in the summer of 2020 with the covering of the disappearance, and we now know murder of Linda Stoltfus, and I've done one every month, so this has to be about number 12 or 13, somewhere in there. The 13th, 14th episode of Unfound Now. I do this, of course, to publicize these disappearances. These newer ones, they cannot get enough publicity, first of all. Secondly, I like to use these recent disappearances as a way to teach people about disappearances. Nobody has covered more disappearances over the last 5 years than I have. I have a lot of experience, all different kinds of disappearances, and what I'm trying to do with Unfound Now is pass that knowledge on to all of you. I believe that Unfound, I'm all about the education and teaching people. This is not a show, it's a news program, but it also, I guess you could say, is a missing persons class. What can you learn? And my attitude has always been, the more people understand about disappearances, the more these disappearances will be solved. I have an absolute belief in that. And my perception is 5 years into this program is we still have a long way to go. I think the public's perception of disappearances is a lot different than the way it actually is. Most importantly, I'm not here to tell you what to think. All right, all I'm trying to help you is to teach you how to think. I think a lot of the disappearances, certainly the ones we've covered on the program, and maybe to a lesser extent some of these that we've covered on Unfound, they have a wide range of possibilities. It very well could be murder. It could be a suicide. It could be just a walk-off. It could be an accident. A lot of these lend themselves to a lot of different possibilities. So the best way to try to narrow it down is, what are you supposed to think? What can we think? How should we think about the facts that are presented? And sometimes we just don't have a lot of facts. Before I get into Justin's disappearance and into the specifics and some analysis, I just want to remind you that Unfound, the main program, comes out every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern. It's on Podomatic, it's on iTunes, it's on Spotify, it's on, as a listener has told me recently, reminded me to tell everybody, it's on Audible. We are on Stitcher, every podcast platform that is out there, Apple Podcasts, we are there. And I appreciate everyone who listens to the weekly program. We're coming up on our 5-year anniversary this next Friday. We also are on Facebook, of course. We have a very large membership in our Facebook group, over 8,000 members in there. We have our Facebook page. We have this YouTube channel, and for an audio program, you'll probably be surprised on how many videos you will find on this channel. It's a combination of the audio programs being converted to video, Of course, these Unfound Now episodes, the live show that I do every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. It's like a 2-hour program, probably a little more laid back than the Friday episodes are. I also use YouTube for map analysis. Sometimes these disappearances, it's hard to explain things just using audio. So I use the YouTube channel to go through a map, street view, routes, locations. And I wouldn't say I do that every week, but it seems like maybe every 4th episode I feel the need to do something like that. We are, of course, on Instagram. We're on Twitter. We have the great website, theunfoundpodcast.com, probably one of the largest inventories of missing persons information that you will find. And if you'd like to contribute to the program, patreon.com/Unfound Podcast, and PayPal, paypal.me/Unfound Podcast. Now, if you've watched Unfound Now before, even if just one of them, but pretty much since the beginning from last year, I like to stress 3 points on each one of these episodes. And these points differ, they change from episode to episode, depending on the facts of the disappearance. So for the disappearance of Justin Siwek, here are my main 3 points. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tell you what they are. We'll go through the facts of Justin's disappearance, and then I will come back to these 3 points and analyze them more in detail and using Justin's disappearance as a template. Number 1, when drugs or crime could be involved, any reason for a disappearance is possible. Number 2, and if you see me looking off to my left, your right, I guess, I don't do this off the top of my head. I do have notes. Number 2, in any analysis, the toughest part is trying to make sense of the illogical, yet this must always be attempted. And number 3, never take anything for granted. So the facts of Justin's Siwek's disappearance, you should know that Justin, and we are always very upfront about this on the regular program, we do talk about missing persons activity, criminal activity, drug activity. We do not do this in a way as to criticize them. But we do know that sometimes criminal activity, addictions, drug activity can lead to disappearances. There's no argument regarding that. And that's the only reason we talk about that on the regular episodes, in addition on these Unfound Now episodes. The truth is that Justin Siwek had a long criminal record. You can check it for yourself. It is public information. You know I don't care about that. Nobody has covered the disappearance of more people who have criminal records than I have. And in fact, in my experience of the last 5 years, we've covered at least 2 men who were well-known drug dealers, and they're still missing. That doesn't matter to me. Okay, but we also have to be very truthful about who these people are. On June 19th, which was a Saturday, Justin met up with a girl, Diamond Wilson. My understanding that she was quite a bit younger than he is. He is 32. I think she was of age, but I think that she might have just been like 19. Allegedly, and we'll come back to this, allegedly they had never met before or maybe just once before. And seemingly they might have met through Facebook. They get together that Saturday. Justin's in his car, meets her somewhere, but he does not come home that night, that Saturday night, June 19th. So the next day on June 20th, that would have been Father's Day for 2021, to hear his father tell it in interviews since, the plan was for Justin's father, Justin, and Justin's son to all go fishing. But Justin wasn't there on Sunday morning. So instead, the father and Justin's son, the father's grandson, they decided to go fishing without Justin. There's no information that I could find saying if they tried to call him, did they try to text him? Did he maybe tell them the night before that he was not going to show up? I've not been able to find any information regarding that at all. Anyway, the father and the grandson go out, and they, just out of nowhere, the father gets a call from Justin. Justin needs picked up. And he says that he is at the Days Inn in Kansas City. And now, after the fact, the father says that this sounded like a distress call from him, from Justin. Now, the father could not go right away to get Justin because, once again, he and his grandson were out on this lake fishing. That was where Justin was supposed to be. Please remember all of this for later. So, my understanding, as best as I could tell, looking at, once again, the facts, just public stories, and his family has done some interviews in the last over the last 2 months. The father gets there to this Days Inn in Kansas City and finds Justin's car. It is vandalized, and there are pictures out there on the internet showing you what it looked like. Like at least one window was broken, not totally smashed out, but had a hole in it. Definitely looked like somebody did a job on this car that looked otherwise like it was probably a fairly nice car. But Justin wasn't there. Diamond wasn't there. And please remember this all for later. And eventually, they could not find Justin. I'm not sure what they did as far as calling him or trying to track his phone or anything. But some days later, it turns out that Diamond was caught on Facebook Marketplace trying to sell Justin's phone on there. She got caught trying to do this. I don't know if she has been charged with anything. But we now know that shortly after this, the police were going to plan a sting of some type. I don't know if to catch her or any other people around her. I don't know exactly what the plan was. It's very nebulous in nature at this point, doing this recording on August 29th of 2021. But for some reason, the police department canceled this sting, and they issued a statement. Of course, as you would expect, as well, we have to protect the integrity of the investigation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which is very common. And really, for the most part, not much news has come out since all of this happened. A lot of this information just occurred just days after Justin went missing, of course, back at the end of June, and here we are in late August, and not a lot of new facts have come out. I've done my best to try to find anything that is public. I've never spoken to anyone in Justin's family. I've not attempted to, and once again, this is I'm not going to necessarily come to any conclusions here, but my point is trying to teach all of you how I look at disappearances, how my assistants look at disappearances, how a lot of my well-educated listeners look at disappearances, to try to look at Justin's disappearance and try to figure out, well, what could have been going on here? So now that we know the general facts, the facts that are public now, let's go back to those 3 points. I'll start, of course, with number 1 and go into them a little more deeply. First of all, number 1, when drugs and or crime could be involved, anything is possible. I'll be honest, I've covered the disappearance of people with what we would call more criminal backgrounds than Justin has. However, you will find that in looking at his background, there are some charges that have to do with violence, domestic battery. This is public knowledge. I did not have to pay a cent to get any of this information. It's out there, so I don't feel bad about talking about it. Once again, we just have to understand who Justin is. And still, I hope he's alive. I hope he comes back alive and healthy. Okay, but this is kind of the world that he lived in for quite a long time. All right, we have to be honest about that. But I've covered the disappearance of addicts, drug dealers, criminals, bad parents. I personally don't care. If a family comes to me and wants to talk to me about a disappearance, if they think that Unfound can help them, then I treat every disappearance the same. The issue, though, when we do start talking about possibly a disappearance that could involve drugs or crime, maybe Justin got lured to that Days Inn, and I'll get into the specifics in a moment. Anything is possible. It very could be that Justin was with Diamond and others, and they were doing drugs, and he overdosed, and they covered it up. Even though I know that he called his father on that Sunday, who knows what happened after that. It very well straight out could be a murder. And if you've seen interviews with Justin's father and read articles, this is certainly what they believe. I don't think you have to read between the lines to know that. But even within that, even if you suspect that, when you have people who make these kinds of choices, the murder could be because of revenge. It could be because there was a beef between Justin and somebody else, and maybe use this Diamond young woman to lure Justin somewhere. It could be revenge. It could be a beef. In certain circles, it could just be murdering somebody just for the heck of it. This happens. We all know this happens. And you're more likely to have that happen to you when you are familiar with criminal activity. Likewise, this could be a misunderstanding as well. We also can't rule out the idea that Diamond and Justin were out, and maybe he tried to do something. She called somebody, and this guy came to her defense, and they covered it up. This, once again, is very common in disappearances. These are all very common in disappearances. So even when we say it might have been a death, it might have been a murder, even within that category, there are a lot of different choices. Likewise, it very well could be that Justin ran off. I know most parents reject this idea. A lot of people in the public reject this idea. But I know for myself, this is more common than people realize. I wouldn't say it's 50% of disappearances. I wouldn't even say it's 10%. But it is enough of a number that we must consider it when looking at disappearances, especially when we have this type of situation. You just don't know what's going through people's heads if they're doing something they shouldn't be doing. We covered the disappearance of Robbie Hurt about a year ago. And I have to admit, at the time, I thought it was a murder. We now know that it wasn't. It is true that he was brought back to life with Narcan, that he jumped in his truck. His truck was found a mile down the road. He wasn't found anywhere around it. And then just within the past year, really just maybe 5 months after we covered his disappearance on the program, some road workers discovered his remains in the bushes beside the road, and there's no belief that there was foul play. These things happen. We also covered the disappearance of Crystal Morrison. For those of you not familiar with her disappearance, I would urge you to look her disappearance up as well. Not to mention, this could be a suicide. I once again realized that his family would reject this. But in my experience, when we have these types of situations, anything is possible. Okay, and I think this will make a lot more sense once I get to some of these other details. Okay, so at this point, I think we have to be very open-minded to a variety of scenarios. And so when you have a situation like this, you have to start looking at, well, what are those facts? Being that we just went through them, I'm going to be going through them here in a moment. I guess what I'm also saying, for those of us who do not have a criminal background, who have never been into drugs, who, all these things, who have tried to make good choices in our life, we look at maybe what could have been going on in that week and say, man, that sounds crazy. Justin meeting up with a 19-year-old young woman he doesn't even know, and they're going to a hotel, and it sounds like something probably your average 32-year-old guy and your average 19-year-old woman would not do, especially if they do not know each other very well. But it seems this is what they did, and so for us, it seems odd. But for them, this might just been a weekend like any other, and we have to remember that. We just have to remember that this might have just been the world. This is just the choices they make, and it's just a regular weekend for them, even though to us, it seems like, well, that sounds like a crazy weekend because that's not something I would ever do. To them, it might be normal. We have to get in their shoes, I guess you could say. So that brings me to point number 2. In any analysis, the toughest part is trying to make sense of the seemingly illogical, yet we must try to do so anyway. And I have listed some of the disappearances that Unfound has covered that seem And are these are all still unsolved? And I could list 50. I'm just going to list 3. I could list 50 that we've covered where the way we understand the details, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. But something happened because these people are still missing. My first choice was Jessie Ross from Chicago in 2006. He was there for a school trip, a college trip. He left the hotel at 1:30 in the morning without telling anyone he was leaving. On the last night of this conference, just took off. It's been almost 15 years. Gone. Next one, Patty Action from Clearwater, Florida, right near where I live. In fact, I go by the spot where she disappeared from all the time, although it's not the same place now. She disappeared in 1978. She left a hotel. She went there to meet some coworkers for a few drinks. She was there with them. She said she was getting up to go to the bathroom. She never returned. She's never been seen again. And her car was later found a distance away in a parking lot, and there was blood in it, and the blood was hers. So it looks like a murder occurred, but Patty still has never been found, and there's no idea why she would say she was going to the bathroom and would be right back and never came back. Still have no idea over 40 years later. And then the third one I picked out is Shane Fell from Shane Fell from Marrero, Louisiana in 2011. He was on way home from bowling lanes, wrecked his car, took a turn too fast, flipped it. He called his brother to come pick him up. 20 minutes later, his brother got there. Shane was nowhere to be found. Never seen again, and that's a disappearance that's 10 years old. Why would somebody call somebody to pick them up from a wreck, and then when the brother gets there 20 minutes later, the person isn't there, never to be seen again? These things happen. And in fact, I have 2 other disappearances that are just like Shane's, where people called for rides, and when the people showed up, the people who called weren't there, and they're still missing. Or I should say one of them was found. That's Crystal Morrison. The other one, gone. Never seen again. So it must be a thing, to put it in 21st century lingo. So how does this all apply to Justin's disappearance? Well, we have to think about some things. For Justin's, and I'm reading once again off my notes, if the motive was to lure him somewhere to rip him off, like Diamond tried to sell his phone online, why didn't these people, she or whoever else, take his car? His car was at that Days Inn. If the motive was to rip him off, why didn't they take the car? The car certainly has a higher value than the phone, and maybe you could part out of a car, maybe. Or just sell it illegally, as can happen. We've talked about that on Disappearances before, that we've covered on Unfound. So why is that? Something else we need to consider in Justin's. If this was truly a dire situation on that Sunday, he needed his father to pick him up. Why is he calling his father, who he would know was fishing at that moment? I mean, Justin knew that he was supposed to go fishing. He would know that they probably went fishing anyway. Why would he call his father when he knew his father and the grandson would be together, probably out on a lake, and would not be convenient for them to try to go pick him up at this Days Inn? And I'm not even sure how close the lake is to the Days Inn. It's a little bit of a question mark. It seems illogical. Likewise, if the father thought Justin was in distress, like he says he thought, why didn't the father call 911? Why didn't Justin call 911? If he was in dire situation, why is he calling his father? Why didn't he just dial 911? I realize that Justin has, a history with the police, but probably that still would be the best choice if he was in distress. Now, once again, this is his father after the fact saying it seemed like Justin was in distress. But the question is, if the father thought Justin was in distress when he got off the phone, why didn't he call 911 and say, hey, my son's at the Days Inn, something's going down there, I'm really fearful his life, can a police officer stop by, see what's going on? Didn't do that. If this were a dire situation, as the father explains, why didn't Justin call his friends? He was 32 years old. It seems an odd choice. I was 32 years old at one time, and if I was somewhere that was a little complex that I've gotten myself into, I don't know if I would have called my father. So it seems, once again, maybe seems illogical. Justin's car was at the Days Inn. Why did he need picked up? Why did he call his father to have him get picked up when his car was right there? If they wanted to rip Justin off, why vandalize the car? If they needed to break the window to get into the car, why not just use Justin's keys since he would have been there? If this were a plot to rip Justin off, and this is as common as some believe, because that's been talked about, I've seen that written a few places, then why haven't these people gotten caught before? Why is this the only story we have about a young man going missing after being lured to a hotel in Kansas City? Because I looked it up. You know, I personally, once again, having covered 225 disappearances, this is not a common type of disappearance. I'm not saying luring doesn't happen. It does. It does. But usually the luring involves people who know each other a lot better than seemingly Diamond and Justin knew each other. And I'll get to that in a moment. So we have a lot of these illogical things. Once again, just using what is in the public sphere. Just looking at what his family has said, what we understand, what has been told to the public about Justin, about Diamond, how they knew each other, where the car was, the phone call, and everything else. There just seem to be still a lot of holes in all of this. It just doesn't all quite make sense. Probably the biggest point being, why is he calling his father to pick him up and he says he's at the Days Inn when his car is still there? Did somebody take his keys? If so, why didn't Justin just tell his dad that on the phone? Hey, I'm here. Got into a situation. This girl ran off with my keys. Can you come pick me up? That's not what Justin said. So, once again, if we go to the Diamond side of this, if Diamond lured him on the 19th, then how did he still have his phone on the 20th? Remember, this disappearance technically started on the 19th. But we're to believe, I guess, 12 hours later, let's say, 16 hours later, Justin still has his phone. He's still able to use a phone to call his father to come pick him up. So if this was a luring situation, if she was trying to lure him somewhere, why didn't all of the bad stuff just not take place on Saturday night? Why was Justin still around? Why could he still use a phone on Sunday morning? Don't know. So, once again, to go through this, in any analysis, the toughest part is trying to make sense of the seemingly illogical, yet we must try to do so anyway. I think what I'm saying is these are all questions, these are topics you need to consider when looking at Justin's disappearance. How do we reconcile all of this? What seemingly makes the most sense? Now, I realize we can come to a lot of different conclusions, but what I'm also saying is we just don't take things as they sit. I guess what I'm saying is we have to look at disappearances as they are, not as we wish them to be. And number 3, my main point regarding Justin Siwek's disappearance is never take anything for granted. I see this a lot, and what I mean by this, we think we know things when we really don't, and I'm just as responsible. I can have this happen to me as much as anybody. I am the main person for Unfound. I get the most information. I read the most information. I do all the interviews and everything else. And sometimes I do find myself taking things for granted that I then find out later were not necessarily true. So once again, never take anything for granted. And some examples, once again, from Unfound's disappearances, and then I will once again use Justin's disappearance, to see what I see in his for the point of never taking anything for granted. Mandy Stokes, she was a young woman who disappeared from Oakland, California in 2007. Allegedly, as the story was told, she was driving around the parking lot of her apartment complex right before she went missing. In fact, the story is that she was in the middle of a phone call when the phone just clicked off and she was never heard from again. And the story was that, well, she was driving around the parking lot of her apartment complex. Well, guess what? Her apartment complex did not have a parking lot. You had to park on the street. There was no parking lot, as an example. Next one, Dale Kerstetter. He disappeared from Bradford, Pennsylvania in 1987. He disappeared. He was the security guard at a glass factory where they used platinum as part of the process of making glass. Somebody broke into the plant while he was the security guard there, and he was allegedly, seemingly taken hostage. And some of the platinum was cut right out of one of these big cylinders that they used to carry around, I don't know, molten glass or whatever. And at the time, I know that when we covered this disappearance, what was it, a couple years ago, I was thinking, well, this has to be like the rarest thing ever. Somebody breaking into a glass plant to steal platinum. Well, the guest that I had on that program, her name is Heather Grotman. She does a fantastic missing persons blog called Lost and Found Blogs. After the fact, she discovered that at that time, 70s into the 80s, platinum heists actually were quite common. Maybe the public didn't realize it at the time, but you can certainly find the news articles now. So maybe Dale Kerstetter's disappearance, he's still not been found. It's over 30 years later. He's still missing. And the person whoever stole this platinum has never been found either. When you find out that platinum theft is more common than you thought, maybe you start to look at his disappearance in a different light. And then the third point, once again, never taking anything for granted, Eric Franks from Saginaw, Michigan in 2011. His car went missing along with him, and everybody thought, oh, that car has to be long gone. He's missing. We believe it was a murder. I'm not going to get into all the specifics on his disappearance, but he's gone. The car's gone. Surely he and the car are in a pond or a lake somewhere. It was parted out. It was crushed. Something. Nope. Just about this time last year, it was discovered that his car had been sitting in a garage all this time. And that garage certainly was connected to the people who probably caused Eric's disappearance. So everybody thought this car's long gone. It was under everybody's nose the entire time. It's probably still the number one most shocking revelation that has ever occurred in the 5 years that I've done Unfound. So that brings us back to Justin Siwek's disappearance. Once again, never taking anything for granted. Is there actual proof that Justin was at the Days Inn? I've read an article saying he was seen there. Well, by whom? Or is it by who? Who saw him? Who was he with? Was he with Diamond? Was he with other people? Was he by himself? Was he walking this direction? Was he walking that direction? I realized that he called and said, and when he talked to his father, he said he was at the Days Inn. That doesn't mean he was there. And in fact, if we're to believe that there was foul play, it very well could be that he was coerced to make that call and to say that he was at the Days Inn when he might have actually not been anywhere near there. So we're taking for granted that he was at the Days Inn, but do we know that for sure? Is there video? Have the parents seen video? Has the rest of the family seen video? Have the police seen video? And if so, who was he with? And if he was with other people, why is that information not yet public 2 months after his disappearance? Was he with one guy? Was he with 10 guys? Is Diamond seen there walking around? Who's she with? We have none of that information. Until it comes out, I'm going to have to be suspicious and wonder if Justin was there at all. In addition, as I know that we've learned on Unfound, all about vehicles. Just because the car was somewhere doesn't mean the person was somewhere. We experienced this with the Zoe Campos disappearance, where she certainly was murdered. Her remains were found, but somebody was driving around in her car. It was spotted. There was a chase. This person dumped the car in an apartment complex, and we now know that it was Carlos Rodriguez that was driving it. And she had been dead for a while. So just because a car is somewhere does not mean the person is somewhere. So just because the car was found at that Days Inn doesn't mean that Justin was at that Days Inn. It doesn't. So these are some things that they are not facts. They could be facts. They very well may end up being facts. But given what we know in the public, we certainly need more backup than Justin just saying, well, hey, I was at the Days Inn and the car was at the Days Inn. Somebody else could have driven that car there. As far as Diamond goes, and once again, for the topic of never take anything for granted, the story is that these two just met each other. Well, do we know that for sure? How is it that she happened to pick him out? I mean, I know I'm on Facebook. I get friends requests from what I would call fake accounts all the time. And of course, they all get deleted. They all get blocked. So what was it? Was this a situation where Diamond was just sending messages out to a bunch of guys and Justin just seemed to, respond? I'm not sure we know enough about this. I know the story is that they didn't know each other very well, but then how exactly did they meet? And how did they know each other? What was it that she picked him out or he picked her out? We have none of that information. So because of that, we should not take it for granted. In addition, there's no proof that she lured him anywhere. Even if she sold it, was trying to sell his phone, I know what my defense would be if I got caught selling a missing person's phone. Hey, person gave it to me. He gave it to me and walked off. I don't know what to tell you. And I just decided to sell it. What was I going to do with it? And until they find Justin and can ask him, did you actually give Diamond your phone? There's no proof that she's lying. I don't know what she's told the police. But we should state there's no proof she lured him anywhere. And in fact, I would state, being that she was stupid enough to try to sell his phone, it very well could be that she had nothing to do with it, with the luring, if there was luring at all. In fact, it makes it less likely that she had anything to do with it, being that she's just selling that phone right there on Facebook for everybody to see. She had to know that people would start looking for Justin eventually. So we must be open to the idea that he might have given the phone to Diamond. And I know you're saying, well, that just is implausible. I've heard crazier things. So, but, I know it's crazy, and I have it in my notes here, but no crazier than thinking she was trying to sell Justin's phone online right after he disappeared. It's certainly less crazy to think that he just gave her a phone. That's the less crazy choice. So, I think we also must accept one more thing regarding Justin's disappearance. I'm not convinced that he was going fishing at all. I think that that's a story that his father believes. I think he was hoping and everything. But being that Justin went out with Diamond, he didn't come home that night. He didn't call his father that night to say, you know what, Pops, I'm not going to make it for fishing the next day. No call, no text, nothing. And then even when Justin called his father, and he had to know that his father was fishing, Justin didn't say, you know what, I apologize. I really wanted to go fishing, but I got caught up with this woman, and things went crazy, and I just picked up. He didn't say anything like that. I'm sure if he said that, his father would have said that in the interviews that his father's done. Justin didn't say anything like that. And once again, this is one of those things, we must see disappearances as they are, not as we want them to be. And I've heard about these types of stories before. The disappearance that comes to mind, we now know that it's a death, is Noah Davis. He was telling everybody, yeah, I'm going to go to rehab. Yeah, I'm going to go to rehab. Was it his stepfather or his father was going to pay for it, going to go to this great place. Noah's going to get clean. The day Noah's aunt and uncle show up to pick Noah up is the day that he went missing. And we now know that he was avoiding them. He didn't want to go. Just didn't have the courage to tell him, I don't want to go to rehab. I want to continue to get high. This is very common in these types of disappearances. And, I realize that there's a strong motive out there from family members to paint their missing loved one, their missing son, their missing daughter in the best light possible. I get it. But when it comes to solving the disappearance, it only hurts. Because it leaves the impression then of one thing of Justin's disappearance where it could be totally something else. It very well could be that Justin had planned to get together with Diamond for days. And he was just kind of lying to his father to make his father feel good. This happens, common. So if that's the situation, then we would look at this disappearance in a totally different light than thinking, well, he went out, he was planning to come home that night, he got lured somewhere, and this happened, that happened, and then somehow he was able to call the next day. I'm just not convinced he was ever going fishing, because I think that he would have brought it up when he called his father. And he would have apologized or texted him, said, you know what, I can't go. Here's what's going on. Didn't do any of that. He just left the father and the grandson go off he did a no-call, no-show. So that maybe comes to the question, why didn't police follow through with this sting? I think everything that I've explained here kind of explains why they didn't go through this sting. I think maybe my best guess is because they've analyzed it the same way I've just done it here. And they probably think things are not as they seem. The family's trying to portray this as Justin got lured somewhere, something happened, and he was murdered. Very well could be that the police, although initially being told this by the family, that's what they thought, but the more they looked into whatever they can look into, talking to Diamond, talking to people at the Days Inn, looking at the car, looking at any other information maybe they could get from Justin's phone, they decided that it was something else and that it wasn't luring at all. And there was no reason to do a sting because that didn't have anything to do with Justin's disappearance. That is my guess. This just, once again, my experience. I do have recommendations for Justin's family. They could take them for what they're worth. You got to make sure he was at the Days Inn on that Sunday, June 20th, 100%. Maybe that's already been done, but it is not obvious from the public information. Who saw him that can be trusted at the Days Inn? If you've seen video, of course, video doesn't lie. Is there video? If so, this should be fairly easy to solve. Was he by himself? Was he with other guys? Is he seen getting in a car? Do they have him on video, like when he's making this call at 11 a.m.? If he's not seen in the couple hours before 11 a.m. or after, then it might be reasonable to believe that he was not at the Days Inn at all when he made that call. Really, really have to nail that down. Next, I would look more into the relationship between Justin and Diamond. I know that publicly you've said, well, he's only known her for a short time. My experience would tell me probably they've known each other longer than that. Just what I've seen from the information. And lastly, you must seriously reconsider the idea that, as I've already stated, that Justin was ever going fishing. What this would mean is that this weekend at the Days Inn or wherever was actually planned and that he was not lured. In addition, the problem is addicts and career criminals say a lot of things that they don't mean and that are lies, and they just say them to make people feel good and to get things. So you must seriously consider that. And I think if you come to the conclusion, you know what, I don't think he was going fishing, and then you must start looking at the idea that actually he had this weekend planned with Diamond and not with his father and with his son. And it paints this total disappearance in a totally different light. But I should say, my opinion, there's no reason to believe Justin is deceased. There's no reason to believe that. There's no reason to believe there was foul play or anything else. All we have is a young woman who was trying to sell his phone. However, my opinion is also that this was not necessarily a luring situation where Diamond tricked him into going somewhere. At this point, given the public facts, I see no reason to believe that either. So that is my analysis of the disappearance of Justin Siwek from Kansas City, Kansas on technically June 20th of 2021. Once again, remind you that our episodes come out every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern. I urge you on this YouTube channel to subscribe to the channel. Like this video, please give it a thumbs up. That helps us with the YouTube algorithms. And consider joining us in the group, on the page, following us on social media. Go to the unfoundpodcast.com, paypal.me/unfoundpodcast, patreon.com/unfoundpodcast. And that's all I have, and I appreciate you watching this episode of Unfound Now.